Hello and welcome to We Love History Live. This is a Q&A on carved stones in Scotland. My name's Nikki and I'm one of the casework officers. Today we're going to be talking about carved stones dating to the medieval period. We're going to be talking about stones in Angus, the Western Isles and Shetland. Please do submit any questions you have on our Facebook page or on the YouTube channel. Okay, well, I think without further ado, I'd like to welcome my colleague, Nikki. Hello, Nikki.
Hello, Nikki.
Hi. This is going to be confusing. But I just wondered, Nikki, if you could tell us a little bit about the carved stones in at St. Vigen's.
Yeah, so St. Vigen's collection is one of the best collections of early medieval carved stones, certainly in Scotland, probably in Britain, arguably even in Western Europe. It's one of several collections that Historic Environment Scotland cares for. So this collection comprises 34 early medieval carved stone fragments, so probably 8th, 9th century, so 800s AD. And a few later medieval architectural fragments, so bits that used to be part of a building or buildings. It is an incredibly important collection for the vast range of the iconography that it explores. There's evidence on these stones for buildings, for objects, for clothing, for Pictish liturgy. So it's incredibly important for a whole range of reasons. People,
and I guess it's hard to pick out, you know, one or two from this collection, but this image that I think we're going to see next, is that, could you tell us a bit about this one for our viewers potentially?
Yes, this is this is a portion of the Droghston stone, which is probably one of the most important stones anywhere. Its importance was recognised very early on. It was one of the first items to be included on the register of monuments after the introduction of the Ancient Monuments Act back in the 80s. So its importance was recognised very early on. And that importance relates to what you can really see here is the inscription. So we have 3 names recorded here. And they represent Pictish, Old Irish and Latin. And this is an incredibly rare survival from Pictland. There's no manuscript surviving from Pictland from this period, and most stone inscriptions tend to be in Ogham or Ogham, so that, you know, script people might be familiar with, that kind of lots of lines going across another line. Whereas here what we have is a script that looks as though it could have been written by a scribe. So this really is important for, you know, the evidence that it gives us of literacy within Pictland. It's perhaps related to saints. We don't actually know the proper translation of it. So it could be that this commemorates saints, important patrons. We're not entirely sure, but it is evidence of a literate people operating within Pictland in that time.
And I guess there's another image that I think is just about to come up with some kind of figures in snoods, maybe clerics. Is that right?
Yes. So we have here clerics. So this again, it shows that these are important people within Pictland, that they are being chosen to be portrayed on these stones. It's giving evidence of the type of clothing that they would have worn. It's showing us evidence for tonsures. It's showing us evidence of shoes. We have evidence of, you know, more secular clothing. So just below these figures, we have a figure in a sort of snood, which matches surviving examples. Yeah, we can see that here. So this helps us build a much clearer picture of Pictish society, Pictish culture in this period, because again, these stones are one of the few ways we have to get into the mind, the minds of these people. So these really build a picture of a sophisticated culture.
Yeah. We've just got a quick question, which we will pick up on later in the talk. It's about the reuse of Neolithic stones, but we will touch on that a bit later. Sorry to interrupt you, Nikki.
No, that's fine. Yes.
I know there's so much to talk about.
Yes.
Can I just ask? This site is a property in our care, and am I right in thinking it's not open at the moment for visitors?
It's obviously not open at the moment because of the whole pandemic thing.
Yeah.
Pesky. Under normal circumstances, people could apply to Arbroath Abbey, and then arrangements would be made for it to be open for people to go in, and certainly I would very much urge people to do so once things return a bit to normal.
Yeah.
People want to know more, we have our statements of significance, which are available online. So there's one for the whole collection, and then there's a few of the more important stones have their individual.
Yeah. And also the Angus we are on the Canmore record, which is also a really useful resource. Is there a new book coming out about or a publication coming about?
Released already. We have a Jane Geddes publication. So a few years ago, we commissioned Jane Geddes of Aberdeen University and a few other scholars to do some new art historical research into this collection as part of the redisplay we carried out. So that's available. It's called Hunting Picts, and it's it looks into the place name evidence, it looks into the inscription, it looks into the iconography on them. It also includes a catalogue of amazing photographs and some of John Borland's very excellent drawings of the stone, which pick out details that are quite hard to see otherwise. So yeah, if you know more about the St Vincent's collection, that's probably the absolute best place to go, is to check out that publication.
That's lovely. Thanks very much. I think we're going to stay in Angus just for now, but move to some other picture stones that were also within the care of Historic Environment Scotland in Aberlemno. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about these stones?
Yes, so the Aberlemno stones, it's a sort of mini collection. So we have 3 roadside stones. Sort of seeing here a sort of aerial picture in our one of our interpretation panels. So there's 3 that stand by the roadside. So there's a couple of what we would term class 1 stones. So they just have the picture symbols on them. So the mirror and comb,
yes,
the
yes. I think we've got one coming up. Serpent stone, is that right?
Yes, that's a serpent stone. So that is one of the best samples surviving anywhere in Scotland of a class 1 picture stone. The carvings are really clear, the symbols are really evident, they're very well carved, so we can really get a sense of just how sophisticated these carvings are. The other stones that we have there, one's not quite so good perhaps, but we do also have a class 2 cross slab by the roadside. And then
this is a later period, isn't that right? Yeah.
Well, it's slightly later, hard to know.
Or is there a crossover?
Yeah, so the class 2 slabs tend to have Christian iconography on them as well as the picture symbols, which tends to be an argument for them being later after Christianity becomes part of Pictland. But obviously, just because something doesn't have Christian iconography on it doesn't mean it wasn't produced in a society that was becoming Christianized. So I mean, it's something Jamie could maybe talk about later, but it's difficult to place a chronological sequence on them, but generally we think class 2 come after class 1.
Okay, and just very quickly, we've got another question which may relate to St Vincent's, but I'm not sure. It's saying, Lisa on Facebook, hello. Where were these stones? So St Vincent's, were they discovered at the site?
Yes, the St Vincent's ones, a lot of them were actually discovered within the fabric of the parish church. So restoration work was carried out in the 1870s, and they were found built into the church, so they've been used as building material essentially, and they, along with some from the surrounding graveyard, were gathered together to form a collection, which was then to a predecessor of HES in the 1960s. So they were all
the other ones, I guess, were they found by the roadside to almost where they are, more or less, or?
Yes, the 3 roadside ones we think are pretty much in their original locations, which is quite rare to be fairly sure that it's in the original locations. That can really help us to try and understand why these stones are erected in the first place. And also the churchyard one, so that's the one that's a bit further down the road and within the churchyard of the local church. Yes, there we can see it. Right? Yes, yeah, it's probably been moved, although we don't know how far. It probably forms part of the same suite or part of the same sort of society or culture that is producing the roadside ones. So there is probably an intention that they were in some way intervisible with each other.
There's a hole there as well, isn't there? That's quite interesting.
Yes, possibly from previous attempts to move it is the most likely explanation. We're not entirely sure, but if you want to heft the ground, drilling a hole in it so you can put a bit of rope and heft it is probably the easiest way to do that. But thankfully it's not remove too much of the the symbolism or anything on the stone. So yeah, and it could have been I'm being informed by our others being part of sort of Celtic rituals as well.
Yeah.
So yes, it's we don't know why the stone has that hole in it. Any number of reasons, and when I develop my time machine, I will happily be able to try and find out.
Lovely. We just had another question. They're coming thick and fast. The one before, there was something about the Drosten stone. We can maybe come back to that in a minute. But Janine on Facebook is asking about the class system. We can maybe touch on that a bit later if that's okay, because we were going to talk about that a bit more. Yeah. The Drosten stone, I think there was a symbol of St. Peter. Is that the question?
There's a massive amount of that sort of biblical iconography on the Drosten stone and other stones at St. Fidgeon's. So it's really showing that this is a society that is very much aware of biblical ideas and scholarship that is coming out of continental Europe, Northern Africa, even. So these, it is part of a wide-ranging, sophisticated culture. This is not related ends of the earth backwater. This is a culture that has all the latest thinking in Christian liturgy, and is then displaying interpretations of it on these massively important monuments. So yes, it's Dr. Kelly's kind of all these kind of snaky relationships and things in her publication, and there's a little of it in the statement of significance that I mentioned. So yes, that's the place to really drill into iconography. But yes, that is definitely part of the imagery that is being portrayed here.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's been fascinating having a little look at those stones. We're going to stay in Angus for now, but we are going to move on to another stone, which is not in our care. It's a scheduled monument in a private garden, and I'm very pleased to welcome to discuss it Jamie Barnes. Hello, Jamie.
Hello.
Hello from Glasgow.
Yeah,
greetings from Edinburgh. Jamie, you'll know this stone very well. Just for the viewers, this is a Doors Open Day event, and every year we allow members of the public to visit this stone, which isn't normally accessible because it's on private property. And the very, very lovely owners, who I hope are watching, and the great people at Angus Doors Open Day facilitate an event where we can show people this lovely stone. And yeah, I wonder if you could just tell us a bit about it, Jamie.
Yep. Okay. This is a Pictish cross slab. The broad date range is between AD 700 and 1000, although it's likely early in that series. It's really tall. It's about 2.76 metres high, but 1.5 metres wide, and it's not actually that thick. It's only about 0.24 metres. It's decorated on both faces with a variety of carvings, partly in shallow relief and partly with incised lines. The west face, what you can see now, bears a large cross carved in shallow relief with double hollow armpits. It's decorated with interlace in the cross arms and immediately above the roundel formed from long animals. There are a pair of beast heads above them, and elsewhere in the cross is flying-like animal, a centaur carrying axes in each hand, a cauldron with protruding human legs, a pair of bearded figures with axes, and a deer head with a triple disc symbol beneath. The rear face, which we'll get to in a little minute, is a little bit more simple, which has a serpent, a fish, and an incomplete mirror, or perhaps triple disc symbol. But we'll get to the key points now, and we can go back through that. I suppose I should start by answering the earlier question about what are Class 1, Class 2, Class 3 stones. Briefly, it's the earlier system that was created by Romilly, Allen and Anderson. To keep it simple, Class 1 stones are generally unworked, naturally shaped stones that have been incised with Pictish symbols. For example, Aberlemno 1, that's the serpent. Class 2 are generally cross slabs that are worked stones, so they've been shaped and they're incised with Pictish symbols and have a Christian cross on one face, such as Glamis 2, which we're looking at and discussing now. Also St Orleans, Aberlemno 2, Easy, Dunfermline and the Hilton of Cadboll. Class 3 stones are later in the series, and I guess the most significant example would be the Duplin Cross, also known as Constantine's Cross in St Serph's Church in Dunning. It doesn't really have any of the classic Pictish symbols on it, but it's most definitely coming out of the Pictish world. So,
and there was another question we should maybe pick up on, was the reuse of Neolithic stone. I know that this particular one has some cut marks on it, doesn't it, at the bottom? But some of them are reused from the Neolithic period. Is that right?
Yeah. So this one's unlikely to be in its original location. It was possibly brought in from a nearby Christian graveyard, perhaps. But it's been suggested that it's been sunk up to a metre into the ground, and there are some little what are prehistoric cut marks on its base. So if you're looking at the front face and you look below the cross, you can see them. There's an indication that Glamis 2 is actually a reworked prehistoric standing stone, and originally it would have had its rear face carved with the three Pictish symbols and then the cross carved. So it may actually be, that's the argument that's made, that Glamis 2 may actually be an early one in the series. So initially Class 1, like standing stone, and then it became Class 2 when the Christian iconography was added on the front.
We've also got another quick question about from Cynthia Winston. Hello, Cynthia. She's interested in the tools that were used to carve the stones. Do we know? I guess we're getting information about that more recently. It's perhaps the Riney Pix project. Do you know anything more about that, Jamie?
I can't say too much other than the stones that are incised or they're carved in relief. It would have been metal chisels that were used to peck away. There's some scholars in Sweden, for example, which are undertaking quite interesting analysis on how stones were carved, and her name is Lila Kitzer, and she's done work which is trying to determine the particular hands that carved each stone. So when you look at the chisel wear analysis on one rune stone, and you can then say, oh, if this person carved that, it carved this, so you're starting to see the sculptors are moving around, they're itinerant. So it's a masterful trade, but it's most likely metal chisels.
Okay.
The symbols and the iconography.
Oh yes.
Okay. We'll start with the Christian face, which is quite an interesting one. So, as I said, it's probably a mental face. experimental phase, maybe early in the series of the Carve 2 cross labs. The interlace designs appear to have been inspired by the pages of illuminated manuscripts, such as the Lindisfarne Gospels or the Book of Durrow. In terms of the imagery, the centaur is clearly an adoption from the classical world, with his body stepping in the tradition of the Pictish horse, for example. The supposedly fighting men with axes are the same style of the Pictish male figures elsewhere. For example, as we see at the royal site of Rhynie in Aberdeenshire, so we've got connections there. There's a little
I think that's the centaur.
Sorry, yep, there's a centaur. If we go down to the sort of bottom left of the stone, sorry, further up, just above the dancing or fighting men, what we have here is some dangling human legs from a cauldron, which is a common device in Pictish art. They can also be found dangling from the mouth of a beast or the Ketos on the nearby Woodray cross slab, which is probably an allusion to the mythological sea monster devouring man. And I guess you should sort of see also the parallel in the story of Jonah and the whale. So I guess one of the really interesting things about Glamis 2 is it shows a clear understanding of Christian liturgy. And that's quite significant if this one is early in the phase. And it's also, much like Aberlemno 2, its interlace is quite significant. So, there's lots more to be said in Glamis 2, so I recommend checking Canmore, to be honest, and also looking at Glamis 1 and Glamis 4, which are also from that site.
Yes, Glamis 1, isn't that in the wood?
Yep.
Not far away. I can't remember where Glamis 4 is it?
Yeah, Glamis Hunter's Hill, which is
right.
also a class 2 stone. It's in a little interesting railing. It's all a bit overgrown with trees, but it's worth visiting. Glamis 4 it's now in the Glamis parish kirk, actually, so if you can get access there. So there's a lot of stones in this area of Angus, so if you're in the area, after lockdown, have a visit.
Absolutely. And just once more to say, very thanks to the lovely owners of the stone who allow both ourselves and I think the Pictures Art Society to visit the stone, and we hope to continue with that, and we wish them well. But we just wanted to provide something for this year instead of not being able to at all because of COVID. So that's great, Jamie. Thank you very much indeed. So I think now we are going to leave Angus to briefly discuss stones elsewhere and from a slightly different period. So I think we're going to go first to the Western Isles to talk about a stone there. Jamie, can you tell our viewers a bit more about that, please?
Okay, so this is a departure from Pictish stones. I thought we'd quickly look at some Scandinavian or Viking-influenced carved stones. The example that we're about to look at just now, should appear on your page in a minute, is called the Kilbar Cross or the Kilavara Cross from Barra. It's actually in Yolagari, next to the little airport beach in the north of Barra. So again, I recommend visiting. So this part of Barra, in this time period around 800-900 AD, was part of what's known as the Sudreyar, or the southern earldom of the Norse period in Scotland. And this part of the seaway there was known as the Viking Superhighway, but we don't have that much Viking Age sculpture from the Western Isles as we do elsewhere on the British Isles. So the Kilbar example is interesting in that it's one of only a few carved stones with a runic inscription from West Scotland, the others being from Iona and Inchmarnock. And
can you just say what runes are?
Sorry?
Just very quickly. Can you describe what runes are? I think we had a question about it. Runes. Runes
are an early form of alphabet. So you get Anglian or Anglo-Saxon runes and Germanic, Scandinavian runes. I'm not a rune expert, so I won't make a fool of myself, but you get the Futhark alphabets. And this example, as I said, has runes carved, and we'll get to that image in a moment.
Great. Sorry to interrupt. Carry on.
It's in a conversational style, so just feel free to stop me.
We are.
Yes. So the front face that you can see is filled by a cross in low relief. It's incomplete, but it's only about 0.85 meters high. It's defined by bead molding. Between a stone on the Isle of Barra and some of the artwork in, Govan. That's quite an interesting clip.
Lovely. Thanks very much. I'm not sure if my video is working, but apparently the audio is. So we'll just keep going. Let's just talk about. Let's go to Shetland.
Yeah.
Okay, this is like the Eurovision Song Contest. Hello, Shetland. Can you tell us about the stone up there that you're going to talk about, the St Ninian's Isle, please? Hello and welcome back.
Hello.
We apologise about that. Something went wrong, but we hope we're back with you. Jamie was just talking about the Kill-the-Bar stone on Barra. Not sure how much our audience heard about it, but Jamie, you were talking about the front face, the back face, the runes.
Yeah, I'll quickly summarise the exciting parts, and then we'll move on, just in case I'm repeating myself. The interesting thing about this stone is there are suggestions that some of the artwork can perhaps be paralleled in Govan. Previously, people were connecting it with the stuff in the Isle of Man and elsewhere in Argyll. The runic inscription in the back is particularly significant. It's a standard formula, and it basically suggests that it's a commemorative formula referring to the erection of the cross in memory of a female named Thorgerth. And when we think about Viking men and Viking women, most people think about male warriors, but thankfully things are changing and women are coming to prominence more so in academia. So it's a fascinating stone, and if you're ever in the Isle of Barra, fly into the airport, get off the plane on the beach and walk over to the Kilavara Chapel. Should be there.
Lovely. Thanks very much. We've just got another question from Lily on YouTube, which I'm wondering if you can answer. The style used to carve people, animals, etc. Was this the preferred art style, or did people back then not really aim for realism? Wow, that's a question.
Okay. So there's lots of abstract art in terms of what you see carved on stones and in illuminated manuscripts. Lots of animals, lots of fantastic beasts. There is some realism. You do tend to get male figures, for example. So I think I mentioned earlier the Duplin Cross in Dunning. You've got sort of legions of men carved there. So it all just depends on personal taste. In terms of Viking or Scandinavian art styles, there's a whole sequence of art styles, from Bora right up to Yelling, and it tends to be animal, fantastic, and abstract. Pictish art, also abstract with some realism, but it's a massive subject, and there's some great books. There's Viking art by David Wilson and Clint Jensen, and there's the Art of the Picts by George and Isabel Henderson. So I recommend those two.
I suppose as well that they may mean something that we don't really understand. So they probably symbolise things, and that they're not necessarily they're possibly more deep than that as well, not necessarily representative. Nikki was just telling me that the ones at St Visions are very naturalistic animals. So that's interesting. Okay, so I think we're going to whiz up to Shetland, and this is St Ninians, I think. Can you maybe tell us a bit about this site and the stone you're going to talk about, Jamie, please?
Okay, so we won't focus too much on the site of St Ninians. It's quite a significant site in of itself, with a lot of interesting, rich finds, we might add. But I'll focus today on the Viking Age hogback, which was discovered there. So to start with, I guess I'll say that a hogback is a type of recumbent carved stone of Scandinavian influence that has a distinctively curved ridge and bomba, which is round, convex shape, and they date largely to the 10th and 11th centuries. And thanks to the work of the late James Lang, these stones were brought to our attention in about the 70s and 80s mainly, and they remain a heavily debated subject to this day. And one of the key points is, are they burial monuments or otherwise, or both? So currently the corpus of hogbacks, that is those accepted as being a hogback in line with the criteria that I recently defined, contains about 149 examples, and they're all across the British Isles from the Viking Age. And there's 24 and counting associated kindred monuments, and that's another debate. So in Scotland, we've got about 30 hogbacks. Govan has 5, being the most famous site. 117 hogbacks in England, and 2 hogbacks from Wales. These figures, again, are heavily debated, so we'll ignore that. But people can ask me questions in the future if they wish. So the St Ninians Isle hogback is a bit of an outlier, both in terms of its location and its material. It's the only example from Shetland. It's the only example from Shetland. I don't know why I'm questioning myself here.
It's always good to question yourself.
Yeah. It does not have a curved ridge or ornament, but the bomba or convex shape signposts that it may perhaps be a local response to the hogback tradition seen elsewhere, but it's carved from local steatite, which is much less easy to work than sandstone or limestone. So if you've seen the Govan hogbacks, you'll be surprised at how massive they are compared to the St Ninians Isle hogback, because it's only, about that size, I believe. Now, this hogback is found in an area which is known as the Nordriar, which is the opposite to the Sudriar, which we spoke about in terms of Barra earlier. So that's the northern earldom of the Norse period in Scotland. It's very basic or plain, but it does provide us with evidence of either Scandinavian influence or presence at a site most commonly associated with the Picts and Christianity. And we see this crossover of Pictish and Viking activity across Scotland, and particularly in the Northern Isles. So surrounding the Northern Isles, you've got another 4 hogbacks from nearby Orkney. So these are from Rendell, Kirkwall, there's a couple there, and Scale. But these examples, again, may be debated to be not hogbacks. And there's a few other stones, as I said, all across Scotland. So, it's not the most exciting example, but it's just been used to show, the spread of the influence of this style of carving the hogback. It appears to represent a break, that's the hogback, a break in the generally explicitly Christian tradition of carving the kindred monument type, or the shrine tombs, which you see at St Vigins, for example. And they are thought to be distinctively Scandinavian in character. And I've argued, and others have argued, that they do indeed signify a flurry of Viking activity in northern Britain during the 10th century in particular. And it's often asserted that the hogback is directly associated with burial, but there is almost no physical evidence to support this theory. But it remains very much up for debate today. Also, yeah.
No, go on.
Also, Shetland's also got an interesting body of these little small Norse crosses. These probably postdate the hogbacks, but this is uncertain.
I think we've got a
slide
coming up. I think we've got a slide coming up showing those, possibly.
Well, if not, they're very simple little crossmark stones. But when we're thinking about the Northern Isles, it's really important to note that, up until the well into the 15th century, Orkney and Shetland basically remained under Norwegian control. So to have a Scandinavian influence in burial or otherwise is not uncommon. But in terms of trying to understand Scandinavian or Viking activity across the Northern and Western Isles, the best place to look is at the known settlement and burial sites, rather than the sculpture, because the sculpture is quite fugitive in the Northern and Western Isles in terms of the Viking Age. So
great. Wonderful. Well, that's been really interesting. It's been quite a varied talk about a big subject in not very much time, but I'd just like to thank Nikki for her input today.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
Was there anything you wanted to pick up on briefly? There was a few questions.
Ooh, I can't remember. But
don't worry. There was something about the tools. I think there was something about the tools.
Yes. There's the tools that kind of the sculptors were using are probably just very much similar to the tools that sculptors use now. Having people have looked at images that appear on early medieval stones of carvers and in manuscripts, and very much it's a chisel, a mail, very much as would be used now. And certainly sculptors who are sort of recreating stones, so like the recreated Hilton of Cadboll, for instance, are very much using those traditional techniques and methods and tools. So very little has changed in that sense.
Yeah, great, lovely. Well, thank you very much once. And Jamie, thank you very much as well for your piece. Obviously, thank you and goodbye. Bye. And we apologise for say it again. Sorry.
So we have one more question, just about the
Oh,
killer.
one more.
Yes.
Oh, yes. David
So-
on Facebook is asking, is
Yeah.
the Kookaburra stone on the site the original? I had a memory of it in a fiberglass copy with the original in the NMS, National Museum of Scotland.
Yeah, that is correct. I should have made that point.
Thank you, Jamie.
It's still worth visiting the site, as it's an incredible early
Absolutely.
medieval. And I guess my final point would be, please make sure that you go onto Canmore and type in the names of these stones, and that will give you a lot more information than we've been able to impart today, and it'll lead you down a rabbit hole of similar stones.
Great. Thank you very much. And I'd just like to say thanks very much for watching, and apologies for the technical issues we've experienced, but hopefully you found that really interesting. Thank you and goodbye.